You are a B2B service-based business owner and you are looking to gain more clients, create more impact, and more revenue in your business. Tune in to Amplify Your Marketing Message with Christine Campbell-Rappin. Every week, we're going to take you through how to build an audience of buyers, mastering your marketing message, and making offers that convert consistently. We'll see you all on the inside. Welcome back, everybody. You are going to love today's conversation because we often talk about doing more with less, but I'm going to take you in a whole new direction of what that means because we're not talking about productivity. And I'm super excited to introduce to you a friend of mine in my network, Kim Groshek. She is somebody who's going to help you rethink how you go about things so that you actually do get to do more with less. And one of my favorite ways to do it is through simplification. So give a very warm welcome to our show. This is the lovely Kim, the Pause Lady. Welcome to our program. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I want to know, you have a remarkable story in history, but where did you start to see the magic of the pause?
I saw the magic of the pause. So I'm a computer scientist by trade, and I saw the magic of the pause when I actually found myself actually in kind of almost embedded inside of the computer. Can you believe it? And this was in the 90s. This was many years ago. My daughter, who was around 3 at the time, came up to me and was tugging at my shirt while I was embedded in the computer, right? I used to be really creative in the computer. I actually was born and raised around computers. My dad was a computer operator, and the whole room that he worked in was full of just lights digitized. And he used to bring me to work, and I used to love playing on the keyboard. And when my daughter was standing there, and I was actually not even aware that she was standing there and she was trying to get my attention, I realized at that moment that I needed to start stepping back and managing my time proactively so that I wasn't actually getting sucked in to the creative processes that I did in my career for 35 years.
I love this idea of the danger of being sucked in to our own internal conversation, because it is the challenge for every business owner I know. And one of the reasons why people come to work with me, I said, my natural role as a thinking partner is to help you shift your lens from your own internal dialogue, from your own internal justification, from your own internal, I'm assuming the world is through seeing everything I see, to in fact, guess what? You're only seeing one viewpoint. And if you want to amplify and create more impact, you really need to change your lens. So I want to lead us into, how do you start, not hopefully through a moment of wow, but more intentionally, how do we start to master this moment of the pause?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, how our feelings are like the soft type skill. We've got, anger, we've got fears, we've got all this soft skill stuff, and we really can kind of get inside of ourselves in those feelings, and then we start getting into these stories, and I call them gremlins, right? Um, and that is actually very subjective, right? And when I say the word subjective, it becomes very data oriented, right? And then what you can actually do when you actually get into that space where you start getting, oh, it's also almost like a trigger that happens, and then you actually go there. There's actually catching the triggers and actually then getting yourself into an objective point of view, which is like putting this little handout here, and that actually gives you tangibility. I taught this to my daughter actually as she was growing up, so that she could actually see herself outside of herself objectively. And then, kind of like this, right? And then you're kind of looking at both subjective, internal, because you want to look at yourself coming from the inside out, because that's who you are. But then also getting that viewpoint from all of those observations from the outside looking in. So when I personally actually catch myself, for instance, a few years later when, social media became the thing, and I was probably one of the first adopters, that was around in 2005. And people started asking me to come in and speak about social media. I actually started to get in it again, getting sucked in, but then I actually had to learn to look at myself subjectively and how I was using it. And then I would actually, again, data, putting myself like on a bus and seeing myself at the driver's seat and then seeing where the technology stood. And if sometimes the technology was sitting in the driver's seat and I was in the back seat, I had to readjust. So it
Mhm.
was really to, like you said, shifting your mindset to data, and it's, it actually helps you get out of those stories, because a lot of times we'll be sitting inside of social media and we'll be watching everything, right, and seeing what everyone else is doing, and then, oh my goodness, oh, what's Sally doing over here, and then all of a sudden Dave over here, and oh my goodness, there's an event over here, and oh, I just got a message over here, right? Look at all this chaos that's happening.
Mhm.
And then we can actually then say, oh, just a minute, where am I right now? Like, it's almost like you have to step yourself out, come out to objective, right? Ask the question, come over to the objective and say, whoa,
I love that.
you're inside that social media way too much. And in fact, a few years later, I actually found myself, again, as technology started to become the infrastructure, right? The driving force of what we do. Transactions always tell us what's happening in our lives, because corporations and government and everything else is setting their infrastructure up that way. I actually found myself again. So it's kind of a roller coaster, but I did find myself again because my family communicates through social media. So I'm always checking in that group, whatever that may be. And I would wake up in the morning and I would I'd go in, and all of a sudden I'd find myself looking at my watch 4 hours later. So I actually decided at that moment to deactivate social media for 6 months. And actually, I disconnected from the phone. I called the phone company right then and disconnected from my phone. Now, can you believe it? For a whole year, I did this.
Wow.
And how I did it, because people say, "How the heck did you do that? You're actually doing transformation in large companies." Well, I still was doing this type of thing. In fact, I worked remote for before remote became popular. I've been doing that for, the 35 years of my career. But what I did was I put an infrastructure in place where, people needed to call me for an emergency. They go through my husband's phone, but I did not go into the phone and use apps or anything for a whole year. And it really worked. And it actually, when you talk about productivity, when you actually take the pause like that experience I did, which I wouldn't suggest that you actually shut down for that long. That's pretty major, but I wanted to practice it to see if I could do it and adjust my
Mhm.
behavior. And when you do that, you would be surprised that what I experienced anyway is I actually got more time back.
Yeah.
Being,
A lot of it, I would imagine.
yes, because the chaos, right? So you've got all this chaos, you need to get all work done. And I still got a lot done, but I actually got my time back because I was actually focusing on getting results. They got off my plate, so there was less chaos on my plate. So then I actually had more time to do breathing, take a walks. I could learn how to swim better so I could compete in an Ironman eventually. Just took care of myself, got connected with myself more. And when you talk about subjective, right? Yeah, I got really connected with me to see, if there were any kind of things going on with my body, right? Like, how was I eating? Am I, because sometimes you're sitting there not even aware and you're eating because you're in,
All the time. How
focus.
many times do you eat at your desk? And how
Hmm.
many times do you realize, whether it's through social media, whether it's just through the email, whether it's just through your brainstorm create, I'm going to say just anything is always a flag. Pay attention and recognize that you lose yourself into that swirl. And I love this simple invitation, which is, if you recognize that there is an alternate perspective, we invite you to explore that alternate perspective and to gift yourself a break and that little disruption. And I think I'm such an advocate for be a disruptor, but a disruptor in this is disrupting your own patterns to give yourself a break. And so you have that space, almost like this pregnant bubble that will rise that says, take a fresh perspective, because seeing more than one lens is imperative for you to amplify, because you want to talk about not only now you break the pattern, but it is about giving yourself space, and you call it mindful communication. Talk to us about the power, the steps, and why this should be a non-negotiable, because of how it totally transforms the experience on both sides of the lens.
Right. So I'm going to talk about speaking first because there's different type of communication, right?
Yeah.
So I actually use pause in my communication. So when I'm speaking, you might notice I'm kind of speaking fast, and I do have to be alert about that. But I also have to tell myself either now internally or I even will say, I need to pause for a moment and let you catch up to me. And so that mindful communication of giving, just speaking simply and then pausing to give that space, because what I have found is that, when I meet a new person, for instance, they're so excited to meet me, they will talk for 30 minutes without even taking almost breathing. And in fact, we even pausing and breathing, and I know we're talking about communication here. However, we are not all breathing. Sometimes we might not even find ourselves taking that time to breathe.
Mhm.
There are actually studies out there that actually show that we aren't breathing. So the pause gives us that moment to breathe, gives us that moment to give you time to think, gives us a moment for me to think when I'm speaking, and vice versa.
It's interesting. A funny story about my own speed of talking, because I am a rapid speaker by nature. I think that's, yeah. My mother would say it's because I'm the youngest. I got to speak fast to fit it in, and yet my mother would say half the time. My husband would say this too. I don't understand you, and I need like 5 minutes to catch up to what you said 5 minutes ago.
Mhm.
And it's true for my intimates. So never, if you're listening, think it's not you. It's
Mhm.
totally a universally held opinion. I've heard it all my life. And yet, when I am speaking on a stage, I'm very intentional about the pause. And I love how you're inviting us to do that. And in when my earliest years of speaking, I actually would always carry a post-it note into I generally didn't use cue cards, but I always had a post-it note on some visible surface in front of me that said pause and breathe.
Wow.
Two
Nice.
things. One, pause for the audience, and two, breathe for me. And
Mhm.
those were the only notes I took into the space because they were so impactful. They were the one thing that made the difference.
Yes, yes. So that's the speaking side of the house, and especially when I'm up leveling like you, where we're actually on the stage more, we're, getting more visibility, the audience becomes bigger, and that is when it even becomes more important to say less is more, right? Say a few words, pause, and then say and even give time for, the audience to reflect and maybe ask questions, right?
Mhm.
So that's the one, but then there's the actual writing side of the house, and
Mhm.
that's really a big one. Oh my goodness, because there is so much I've found now that people are using communication and texting, and people aren't calling people through audio as much anymore. However, I'm actually readjusting my behavior and doing more of that now.
Mhm.
And people actually are appreciating that. However, when a person sends a text or you receive a text and there's no conversation just between the two human individuals, there has been so much misinterpretation. So it's very important to pause to consider what type of communication that you use and actually do the uncomfortable, which is possibly pick up the phone or go over to the person's house and speak to them in person.
I think this is one of the things we're right now in a community together, and that has been one of the biggest, I would say, regular conversations that I'm exposed to today that is shifting how I show up. And it's showing up in how I reflect into other people. It's reflecting also how I mentor others that I'm guiding, which is pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. And they're like, but I'll send a text. I'm like, pick up the phone. Have a conversation and be thinking intentionally, which is where there's a real theme of this. Breathe, pause, be intentional, and collectively think about the two lenses, or many maybe perspectives more than two, depending on the audience, depending on what you're encountering. But if you want to have breakthrough and you want to have the ripple cast, slowing down and doing less is imperative. And especially when you're in your business, because if you're wanting to attract new clients and you're wanting to get yes and be seen as the must hire,
Mhm.
remember that most people need so many touch points because they don't process what you say for the first time. And that's why we must have repetition. That's why we must slow down even more. And why we also have to invite different ways to say the same thing with clarity, because something will land differently. And
Mhm.
I love that you talk about audio,
Mhm.
written, and how you show up. But it isn't just about experience.
Mhm.
There's things in your daily life that you
Mhm.
can simplify to really embody this. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I use the time box. Like it's my own name. It's just shortening up the Pareto method to 15 minutes. And it actually builds in some soft skill stuff, which is the agreement to do something and then defining something to the nth degree. So you actually see a result within that 15 minutes. And then there's a forgiveness or a grace element in it. Sometimes we don't do it, right? So there's some of that going on because we're so hard on ourselves, right?
Oh,
There's so much to do.
yeah.
But one thing that's gigantic is proactively looking at your days, like your weeks, your days, and actually blocking out pieces of it to give yourself the time and space to do the things that you love, like napping, exercising, reading, researching, singing, creating, writing, whatever, right? And then spending time with family. So I actually do this. Like I have a regular, like I sit down and I block out and I end up with maybe 4 hours a day to do the actual focused work. 4 hours a day. And when I do that, I actually am very productive and people that come in and start working in my world, they cannot believe how much I actually get more done than other people and they think that I'm working 14 hours a day.
Yeah. And this isn't really, I see this trend too. When I first started my business, when I journey as an entrepreneur, I
Mhm.
worked 1 hour a day as a side hustle. It was the first foray into the business. And I created more success in that 1 hour than most of my peer groups. That's why I actually ended up being invited to mentor other business owners, because that
Mhm.
was not my destination. I got out of bed to be a great entrepreneur. People kept saying, "You're making it easier." I said, "It's not easy. It's focused effort on the right things." And I happen to have a very strong business background that gave me some advantages to start with. I now share those advantages with clients, but it's the focused. It is not about how many hours you put in. It
Mhm.
is the clarity of thinking that comes through silence, simplicity, and duplication on a path where you say, "I love my life." Like, what I love about watching you, and we're new to each other relatively. I said it's that you do a lot of life, and I know you're highly successful in your business too. But it's because you found this is what works. And so, if you aren't ready yet to believe, because you're hardly breathing here in our audience at Amplify Your Marketing Message, I want to say follow guides to show you it's possible, and then listen to the habits we're inviting you to explore to shift things. So I always want to ask everybody who comes into this space, you've got some really exciting things, first off, coming on the horizon. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I want to know then what's working in your business. But what's exciting for you right now to amplify your message? What's going on? What's on the horizon? What gets you really excited by the life you're creating and the pause that has facilitated it?
Well, I'm gonna just tell you, just from creating the communities that I'm creating, it's a collaborative community, and everyone is actually practicing the pause, and it's very supportive. I'm actually hearing what my superpower is and how it has been. I just kind of was living, right, like living it. My superpower is connecting and influencing others. And really, this pause movement is one of those. I've been doing that for about the last 6 months. And that is really what has been an inspiration is just being with like-minded people that really want to shift our world in, a positive way and kind of a healing way, right? Because there's so much going on, so much chaos going on out in the world. So that's really the big things. I mean, I can talk about all the programs and all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to go into all of that. Feel free to go check me out. It's all out there, and reconnect with me. I'm very much about. So here's one thing we talk about when we were talking about communication. When I first meet someone, I give them my number rather than saying, "Here's a calendar link." Because they go and they're surprised. They're going, "You mean you're going to be available right after this for 5 minutes to talk to me?" Right? So those are just small little things that make a big difference.
I think it's so important in this space of connection. We've talked a lot here on this show about be human.
Mhm.
And so much is in our head of, I don't want to disrupt you. Whether that's, you don't want to phone your mother, you don't want to, text your partner, your kids, everyone, it's in our intimate family circles. If it's in our intimate family circles, it only amplifies with our client circles and with our peer circles. And yet, if you don't disrupt the pattern and become human and say, it's okay if you're not available in this moment, we can plan. But I just want to know, in this moment, I thought of you. That ripple is unbelievable, both to gift and to receive it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Like, light it up, my friends.
Yes.
So I want to know, for you, what's working in your business right now for you to be creating impact? You've got these communities. Is this
Yep.
the thing, or is there anything else that you feel right now it's a bit of a lift for you, but we also can
Yeah.
observe it from the outside?
Yeah, so I think, everyone talks about funnels and all this marketing stuff that you use. I actually don't use any of that. What it is for me is the connection and, like you said, touch points. I'm giving gifts away to people all the time, and people, because that's what it's about. And I work with, like, I'm talking with people for like 6 months with all different kinds of things where I'm giving, 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 but people start showing up because they want more, right? So it is there are ways to bring people together through in-person networking, which is really my strong suit, right? There is that speaking part of the house, which a lot of people do, but it's more than just going to the digital social media and setting up funnels and all, sending messages through that and whatever people do there, which, I'm not saying I don't use social media. I use AI, I use all the tools, but there's a balance around all of it. And I think what's working for me is human connection.
I love that. I love that you're seeing a theme here. And my friends, it's because we're trying to light the way. Kim, it is an absolute pleasure to have you in my network. We're inviting you to master your message, step into the pause and disrupt the pattern so you can see a new perspective, gain that clarity so you really have the life you want. That's what amplifying your marketing message is all about, is putting your call out, knowing the right people will find you, value you, and people you will honestly want to play with. I'm looking forward to playing with Kim next week in North Carolina. Guys, go connect to her. Thank you, Kim, for being our guest today. We will see you all on our next episode. We'll see you there.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap on another amazing episode of Amplify Your Marketing Message with me, your host, Christine Campbell-Rappin. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss another great episode. And be sure to visit christinecampbellrappin.com/podcast to get a free resource on how to master your marketing message. We'll see you all on our next episode.